Good morning once again, folks. Welcome to Awakening Israel. Awaken my brothers and sisters, our brothers and sisters in Israel. It is Sunday again, the 19th of March. This is the second video on this channel today. Aside, the second one with length, that is. There are one or two shorter videos. What I want to expound upon is who wrote the Bible. I really don't rightfully know. However, there are some biblical principles that we can look at and apply here. One of those is that we know that Yahshua the Messiah basically claims that he wrote the Bible. It was through him that it came to us. Okay, that's a principle that sort of gives it a blanket validity, if you will. We know that different books were interpreted differently at different times. We know that they used different sources, different manuscripts, and as a result, they differ a bit. We know that. And I know that I think the more important question is, are we ready to face the facts that we have been misled and that we have failed to read the scriptures for ourselves and failed to check our beliefs? I find that the more I read this Bible, the more I find that it says things different, or at least says things differently than what I assumed. Yeah, I find that is what blows my mind more than anything else. I also believe that perspectives that are useful are valid perspectives, and I bring that to the table from psychology. The last discipline in psychology that I considered quite good was ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. Acceptance and commitment therapy allowed one to treat pre-verbal insults. There I am collapsing my words again, to treat pre-verbal insults through some of the exercises. It's been a while, and I never did practice it much. I did study it. I did get trained in it properly. I worked at it. I didn't get to employ it. I really wanted to go to somebody who was an expert at it and get the experience myself to have that. I think that's kind of an important thing to do, is to go through the experience as a psychologist. You really do need to be on that receiving end, that experiential end. You need to go through it yourself. Anyway, a perspective that is useful is a valid perspective. That doesn't mean it's absolutely correct. And of course, with the scriptures, we have many perspectives possible. It can generate several perspectives at one time. And I think that it's almost cliche at this point to say that, well, it actually was about the past, the present when it was written, about the present today, which for some of that was also the future, and about our future yet to come. So there's several different places to look at it from. And right now, probably the most important thing in history is that we, humanity today, stand as a collective. I should say what claims to be humanity, because there are fallen devils, there are fallen angels, there are devils among us that walk just like the rest of us, look like the rest of us. And there are different gradients of it too. Different gradients of demon, if you will, different gradients of fallen angelic DNA possible in a body, in a being. We're facing the end of the Earth Age, and we know we're going into it. One of the problems we have is everybody writes about it or talks about it as the end of the earth. Well, it's going to be the end of the earth for you and me. Yes, the end of the earth will come for you and me. I mean, we know that at least this particular body will pass and deteriorate. The life force, the soul, will separate from it, will leave it. Perhaps the most important part, the most realistic part, will separate off and leave it. Yet we have a group of people out there who insist on dominating the rest of us with their philosophies and their massive intellectualism. And I'm pretty tired of it. They are very intelligent, and they lay traps for the rest of us. And of course, initially I was thinking of a particular ethnic group, but then I realized as I'm talking to you that my mind rolls right over to the sociopaths who walk freely among us and exist freely among us. And sociopaths crossed all genders, in case you want more than two of them. They cross all races, in case you don't like the term species. They cross all cultures. Some cultures are more stable and produce fewer. Like the Japanese only have a rate of 1.7%. It is stable because their population is stable. America, on the other hand, being such a hodgepodge melting pot that it was a whopping 4% until recently. And in my estimation, we're approaching close to 8% at this point, which means, it used to be 1 out of every 25 of us was a sociopath at 4%. Now I'm pretty sure that it's at least 1 out of every 15 of us that's a sociopath. It's got to be close to that at this point. And it's going to get worse. Why? Because we have destabilized our culture. We've allowed it to be destabilized. And we have incompatible types here. You've got people who just will not integrate themselves, refuse to integrate into the society at large. And that's a problem. They tend to become destructive over time. And we've got one that wants to lord it over us in particular, saying they are God's chosen ones. They are the superior people, the superior race. There might be more than one group vying for that, but one group does it right there in our faces, and I'm getting tired of them. And then I have to remind myself that they have been infiltrated, that the fallen angels were mainstreamed into their population at about approximately 145, 148 BC, when John Hyrcanus won the Maccabean Wars, the 4 years of wars. He prevailed, and he dictated a horrible settlement. And his settlement was that the Edomites at Mount Seir, who had a matriarchal society, and the Israelite society was patriarchal. John Hyrcanus dictated to the Edomites, who he had conquered, "You will be circumcised." What a nice outward sign of having been converted. "And you will worship the one true God." Or he was going to put them to the sword. What kind of a deal is that, where you have to convert or be killed? So as a result, the Edomites were mainstreamed in to the Israelite population. And they were such wicked people. They had such horrible ways. This was cultural for them. If you want to understand what the Edomites did, you should read about Sodom and Gomorrah. You should read about the character of Sodom and Gomorrah in the book of Jasher. I know you're going to say, well, the prophet Jasher, I've never heard of him. Well, that's because there was no prophet Jasher. It means the book of the upright. It's written in the same style as book of Genesis. Very similar, but it's not part of the Bible. It is referred to in the Bible text. So it does have some standing because of that. Anyway, the main thing I want to get across to you is that I find the Bible quite applicable. And when I started to read the Bible, actually after I had read it about twice. And I was at that point convinced I needed to read it a third time. I realized a few things on my own. One was that when the Israelites were pulled out of, or should I say the Judahites, when they were pulled out of the house of Judah, out of the southern part of the kingdom, and hauled to Babylon, the people went in one way and came out a different way. They were changed. I could tell through reading the Bible that something happened in Babylon and they didn't come back the same. It was a different religion. It was a different faith that emerged from Babylon. I also realized that Joshua failed to do his duty. He failed to follow Yahweh's directives, and he failed to kill them all. Now, in some, Yahweh told them they could save the women that had not known a man. Kind of interesting. Kind of weird. Other groups, they had to kill not just the men and the women, but the children. Then other groups, they had to kill the animals too. The directions were specific. And of course, we look at that and think, how horrible. What a horrible God the Old Testament God was. What we don't realize and we don't put into the bigger context, the bigger perspective, which we just can't quite see, is that all of those actions were called for. That Creator Father God Yahweh had been working for at least 4 centuries, at least 400 years, probably much more than that, with those populations to get them to stop their evil ways. As a matter of fact, when we came over to the Americas, they were still doing their sacrifice stuff in Mexico. They considered it an honor to be chosen and to be the object of sacrifice, to be put to death, have your heart cut out while it was beating, and dedicated to the sun god. That stuff was still going on when the Spanish came over here. And I think it continued for quite a while thereafter. And we had cannibalism around the whole planet. And we certainly had the giants. We had the fallen angels, which were larger in stature, and they seemed to like to eat the flesh of men. So we had cannibalism going on very rampantly. How do you think those big creatures survived? How do you think they ate? What do you think they ate? And by the time Joshua was born, the Idumeans, I used to say Idumeans because it was Idumeans, which is the Greek word for Edomite. So the Idumeans, which I've since discovered is the way to pronounce it, the Idumeans had risen in the society 150 years later, well, a little less than that, less than 150 years later, to the point where their man, Herod the Great, their fellow Idumean, was in charge. He was governor over Israel. Under the Roman Empire, mind you, but he still was top dog. He wasn't a very nice man from what I gather from reading the Bible, but the Bible is very explicit. Calls him an Idumean. Doesn't call him an Edomite, which is the Aramaic word for Edomite, descendant of Esau, whose name became Edom, which meant red. If you don't know what an Edomite is, you can go to my blog and get one of the free resources there. There was a young gentleman named Charles Weissman. He wrote under the name of Charles Weissman. Lorraine, quiet. You can tell she doesn't listen to me on that very well. Lorraine, quiet. I'll have to close the blinds if she keeps doing that. Herod the Great was in charge by the time of your Jesus' birth, my Yeshua's birth. And as a result, when he heard from the wise men that the king of the Jews, the king of the Judeans, had been born, Herod didn't want the competition. He didn't like the competition. He was a bad dude. Like we have bad dudes today that kill and murder to get into power. Like Lyndon Baines Johnson must have murdered a dozen people before he became vice president. They were in his way. So he had his henchmen kill them. That was about to be revealed, which is one of the reasons why LBJ went ahead and killed his president, because he was going to go to prison. And besides that, the guys that run the country in the background were clamoring at the bit because they were going to make money off that war in Southeast Asia. I guess I should refer to it as a police action. It never was considered a war, especially not since we lost it. And at the end, we brought over all kinds of Viet Cong, Vietnamese regulars and settled them up and down the Mississippi. Did you know that's the habit in this country? At the end of such a conflict, we bring over the warriors here and settle them here? It happened after the Iraqi War. 2 groups of 5,000 Republican Guard. They're crack soldiers, they're crack troops. 2 groups, so a total of 10,000. I met a pair of them, and they told me they were jihad, and they were waiting to be activated, and it could take years. Well, just like them, the Viet Cong sat up and down our Mississippi River, waiting to be activated against us, and could take years. Your people in the State Department in D.C. are a bunch of commies. They have pushed communism on the rest of the world. They are the ones that made sure Eastern Europe went communist. They designed that up for that result. And General Patton saw that, recognized it for what it was, and when he came back, he was going to run for president. He was going to tell people the truth about them. So they whacked him. They killed him. And in case you're wondering, the 3 great leaders of the free world, which included Stalin, decided to have him killed. Yes, FDR, his own president, decided to have him assassinated. And that mad dog of an Englishman up there, he, being a fellow traveler, they were all 3 communists. Yes, they were all 3 from the same ethnic group, from the same suburb in Babylon. This group in Babylon became identity thieves. They stole identities of people. They did that, and they came back, mixed in with the Israelites when the return occurred. And we have that written very well in the Bible in Ezra and Nehemiah. And we had another mixed multitude, wherein the priest class did the wrong thing. They knew better. They were educated. They were told what they could not do. They went ahead and did it anyway. So a lot of them were put out of the priesthood because of that. That was a big to-do back then. They put away their strange wives, the women they weren't authorized to marry with, and the children. That must have been a horrible thing. We don't have it well documented in the Bible, but I would imagine that the women were sent off with their children. Now, I would hope they were provided for, but we don't know that. Don't have good records on that. I like the general principle that the Bible was written by Israelites about Israelites to Israelites. It wasn't written to be a history of the world. It wasn't a history of China. It wasn't a history of Africa. It wasn't a history of early America. It was a history of a specific people, their origins and their development. And today, the Israelites, the real Israelites, are being genocided across the planet. Why? Well, for one, they don't know who they are. And as a result, they don't realize who the enemy is. They don't realize the danger they're in. They're in denial. It's almost like a psychosis in that they're out of touch with reality. It's not quite being deluded like the left is. The left is deluded. And their famous delusion is somebody will give me something for nothing. Free stuff costs too much, folks. If I can't afford to buy it, I don't want it. If you won't give it to me for a price I can afford it at, then fine. Sell it to somebody else. That's okay. There are many oddities in the Bible. There's many what appear to be contradictions. There's contradictory or seemingly contradictory evidence, passages, and stories. Only by reading it and pressing it in will we get to know more and get to know better. But I myself attend a Bible study. I do it because I need another set of eyes. I need another perspective. And I also attend a worship service. I do it on the phone, long distance. I can't find good fellowship where I'm at out here, and I haven't bothered to try to get it started because, I don't know. I just don't consider myself a pastor, a priest, or a prophet. Do I have any of the gifts? Yeah, I do. They scare me sometimes. You know, how do I tell a man that he's got cancer when he's got it, and I know it, and he doesn't know it? It's happened twice in my life. One was my father. I went to my mother and told her. She listened to me. She usually didn't like anything I had to say. I couldn't know anything. But this time she at least took Dad to the doctor, got checked out, caught his prostate cancer in time for a radical surgery, which was really rough on him, and he survived for darn near 30 years afterwards. He had a rough year after that surgery, very depressed as a result of the radiation therapy. It's a major assault on the body. I'm going to hold on to the idea that the Bible was written by Israelites. It seems to work quite well for me. We've got a certain group of Jewish gentlemen who have published some works, and they are bringing to our attention their ideas that from their analyses that a small group, certain personages in particular, wrote the New Testament in particular. I appreciate their intellect, their intelligence. I appreciate their analyses. I don't agree with their conclusions. I think they're interpreting the evidence that they've gotten to the ends that they want. They're basically saying that we've all been misled, and we all have to recognize that. Okay, so you want to basically take away all the traditions of the world, all the religions from all the people, and, you want us to follow you, worship you. Interesting. Something about the Bible where some fallen angel or some angel, magnificent angel, wants to rise above Yahweh, Creator, Father. The interesting thing about the Bible, if you look at it carefully, is it works in reverse order as well. I mean, it almost seems to make more sense when you reverse it, especially the book of Revelations, because it describes the fallen angels. And it's the end of the Bible. It's the end of the story. What are we doing talking about angels that fell from their first estate from heaven? What are we doing talking about that at the end of the story? Shouldn't that be at the beginning of the story? So there are some oddities about the Bible that are very mystical. And I'd love to get the proper answers on that. I'm in no rush, though. And if it was written to fool us, to lead us, and they say it was written for good purposes, to give us a morality, okay, great. it has done that, I think. I think it's done that for us. But these gentlemen want to be their own saviors. They want to have us worship them. They want to rule over us. Isn't that what the supremacists out of the Middle East want to do? Isn't that what they talk about? And I even hear one of those, and I'll call them white supremacists because they look white. They aren't quite Caucasoid. They're not as pure a Caucasoid as what I am. I'm not pure. They are problematic. And they have problems, and there are going to be problems. And right now you have their religious leaders in New York City, of all places, preaching that they have to destroy Western civilization. Why do they have to destroy Western civilization? I'm glad he's a loudmouth. I'm glad I've seen the video of him. He's not a very old man, and yet he's saying we have to destroy Western civilization. There's a problem with that. His group has been accused of destroying other nations before, other civilizations before. And are they living up to their nature or calling? Or is this just part of their world domination? I'm asking you the questions. I'm seeking answers. We will know the truth. The truth eventually will surface, will become obvious, will be apparent. We have a small group on Earth that's been causing wars for a long time. They've been documenting the literature, hiding their tracks for thousands of years. Eustace Mullins wrote about them. He said for at least 3,000 years they have been censoring the literature, hiding their tracks, so that others wouldn't discover them. We do know where they came from to a large extent. We know that they were the Phoenicians. They were a seafaring group, and we know that they didn't write about themselves. And what was written about them was written by their neighbors, and it wasn't very kind. We also know that they were very intelligent. Why? Because the Hebrews borrowed their alphabet. They borrowed the Phoenician alphabet and made it their own. And then they added some letters to it. Vowels being added much, much later. We also know that they came out of Polynesia, that they were the survivors of the last Earth Age, and they were on ships, and they sailed into the Middle East from Polynesia. After that place got hurt pretty badly, the New World, the wilderness it was referred to, got the brunt of the last series of plasma attacks on the Earth during the last magnetic reversal, the last pole shift. North America was just devastated. This next time, in case you're wondering, the devastation, I don't know how they know this. I haven't gone far enough to see the roots of this, but the claim is that Europe and Africa get hit hardest this next time. However, just so that you know, the electricity is so violent that it destroys all electrical circuitry, all modern inventions, civilization, all the way around the planet, including the side of the Earth away from the sun. It's going to go everywhere. You can't get away from it. And we are going to have to go underground. And I can tell because one of these days of the Lord that I've read about in the Bible talks about everything on the surface going blind. It mentions going underground. Another one of these days of the Lord talks about the sun becoming sackcloth. It's so dark with sunspots. It's so dark with sunspots that it looks like sackcloth. So we are headed for that. That's what we can expect to see towards the end of this age. At least I think that's what we can expect to see. But we have a half a dozen different major events listed as the day of the Lord, the day of Yahweh. These are major events. I don't think they happen all on the same day. Possible, not likely. And so when you're reading your Bibles, pay attention to that. Why? Because that is where you're going to get your cues, your clues, your tips on how to survive into the next Earth age. We don't all make it. Most of us don't. We have people saying it could be only a few thousand people, like 10,000, less than that even. We have other people saying, oh, at least 10% of the earth will survive. Most likely it'll be 50%, which means we'll be struggling on the surface for resources, and the earth will have been destroyed. Everything is going to be carbonized. I mean, the fires are going to be all the way across the surface of the planet. We're going to be hit by a cloud of dust from the sun that's going to just coat the earth. It'll strangle out everything. Sunlight won't be getting through. It's going to go to an instant freeze. And you also have the volcanoes that are going to be kicking up their dust, their dirt, their ash. And then on top of that, you have all of the combustibles on the surface of the planet going up in flame. You can expect oil wells catching fire. You can expect huge fires from them. You can expect the forest catching fire and burning. You can expect almost anything that can burn to burn. It's going to happen fast. The survivors are going to have a rough time. We have got so many chemicals and so much stuff have we developed without thought of safety that there's going to be a lot of catastrophes everywhere with chemical spills. But the earth will go through a purification. That's what the Native Americans refer to it as. The earth will purify itself. We're going to see things burn, and then we're going to see the ice age again. Hit hard, hit fast, and it's going to be harsh around the whole planet. And by then, by God, you're going to wish for your fossil fuels. You're going to wish to be able to keep yourself warm. You're going to wish to be able to survive. And those folks down around the equator will do pretty good, probably. The folks on the equator, I'm told that's not where you want to be. You don't want to be within 2 degrees of the equator. Well, I can tell you from my reading of the book of Job that the serpent is an analogy from what I can determine. And that analogy is that the serpent is around the earth at the equator. And it consists of about 500 or so feet of water above sea level. As the earth rotates, the waters gather at the waist, at the belly. And the earth's rotation is going to be changed. It's going to be altered. It is speeding up right now slightly. At some point it will speed up quite a bit more. And then the layers of the earth will liquefy. And things will start to get really sloppy. The volcanoes will really go off. There will be a lot of earthquakes. And the crust can shift. At the least, a continent will break off and go into the ocean, at the very least. And we may have a continent rise up out of the ocean somewhere. We may have continents go down into the ocean. we just don't know. Or what we do know, we decided not to share with the public. Liars and thieves. In case you're wondering, it was Richard Nixon, President Nixon, who ordered that this discovery, this information be kept from the public and kept from the scientific community. Dumbass. Should have shared it with us. We should all, if you really want to unite the planet, if you want to unite mankind, this is what you could unite it over. This is a survival thing. We could work together on it. Yes, there'd be tremendous competition. My God, people would say, I want that little strip of land that's going to be available through this ice age. Okay. Other people are going to say, man, we want to be on ships so we can go where we want, and we'll be able to sail this one out, to float this one out, to go through the storm that way. Some places on the earth, there's going to be some really strong winds. You're already seeing it. That's not global warming, folks, or it certainly isn't man-made global warming. That's caused by the angel of the pit, known as Apollyon or Abaddon. And where is Apollyon? Sounds like Apollo to me. What's it sound like to you? And we have the old records in stone, carved in stone to survive the ages, because those people knew it was going to be thousands of years before we faced it. They put it in stone. They put it in the cave work, the artwork inside the caves. They left records for all of us to see. Oh, and that menorah that the Jews claim is their symbol? No. It was pictured on the cave walls way before the Jewish faith came about. Way before. More than 10,000 years before. Yeah, that was one of the plasma displays they saw in the upper atmosphere. That picture, that symbol, that image, that artwork is it's in caves all the way around the planet. Different locations. We don't think they had phones back then. We don't think they had telegraphs. We don't think they had television. We don't think they had ways of communicating with each other. So, the conclusion we can draw is they all saw the same thing. They all witnessed the same thing. We're talking about multiple testimonies, witnesses to what's going to happen again. Now, as far as this man Yahshua goes, there are indicators he's going to be returning before the Earth Age. I know, I'm probably breaking the news here. You're getting it right here, right now. But there are indicators that he may arrive much sooner than that. And we don't have that much time. What is it? 2023, and we're looking at 2046. 23 years. 23 years out. So I've got 23 years. Where do you think Yahshua would suddenly appear to us? When would he show up? Okay? I'm asking you that. I really am asking you that. Think about that. The Bible says no one knows the time and all of that. But there have been two men that I know that calculated the year of King David's coronation. One by reading the history in the Bible, so it had a biblical foundation, and the other one by going after the astronomy and the sequential lunar and solar eclipses that were recorded in the Bible in the ancient holy days, high holy days of Israel, and that have occurred on the high holy days of Israel since then, even though most of you don't know that you're Israelites, and you don't even recognize those high holy days because the calendars have been so screwed with, so turned around. And the other one figured out the year of David's coronation by setting up a computer model and running it backwards until he got the constellations, if you will. He got the phenomena that he wanted to see that were already documented in the Bible. And he got a correspondence. one-to-one correspondence, which means his model was accurate. He ran it back all the way to when David was coronated king. He ran it into the future, and he come up with the same signs and symbols. Yeah, the action happens somewhere, begins happening around 2028, 2029. It's about as much as I should share with you because I don't remember his stuff very well. And I just don't feel like asking him about it. I find him not agreeable. He dominates and intimidates others. If you love your brothers and sisters, why do you want to rule over them like that? He ain't right. Intelligent, genius, but not right. I didn't think I was going to go that far with this today, but it is an extra video on a Sunday here. In case you're wondering, this is not the Sabbath. However, this is the day that it says once in the Bible when the followers of the way met. They met on Sunday. The Sabbath day was still Saturday. It's never changed. Of course, we in America, we do things a little bit better. We declare it the weekend. It's party time. You know, and thank God it's Friday. And we live for the weekend. So we take both days off. Cool. If you really want to understand what's going on, subscribe to this channel. If you really want to magnify your knowledge, then invite other people. Form friendships with other Bible readers. Recruit others. Get them to read the Bible. Talk about it with them once in a while. Have yourself a really good time. It says in the Bible where one or more, two or more, something like that, are gathered together in my name, there the Spirit's going to be. My God, you get a couple Bible readers together, and it's a pretty good time. You get a group of about half a dozen guys together, maybe. Get a gal in there, too, because women will bring a different perspective, and they'll remember what we men may forget. I mean, I've had wives chime in on conversations between the men, and it's like, oh, yeah, she's right. That's in the Bible. Our time has been prophesied in the Bible clearly, regardless of who was used to put it down on paper, who was used to translate it. It does tell us the future pretty doggone closely. It's a little mixed up and confusing. Some of the order's a little weird, I got to admit it. Some of the words are a little different as well. But the Bible does not open itself up to the casual reader. And so there's things you and I can disagree about. That's okay. I don't mind it. I'm very flexible and very open-minded. Maybe too flexible, maybe too open-minded. If you have a different road to salvation that you're pulling for out of the Bible, I want to hear about it. It may be pertinent just to your group, just to you even. Okay? Yes, I think the Bible speaks to us individually. I do. I think it calls to us differently. I think that when we immerse ourselves in the Word, that we get good stuff out of it. That we are actually shown things that other people aren't shown, but maybe we should check out some of these things before we act on them so we don't act foolishly. And believe me, I get a lot of out there ideas, because I listen to it all. I listen to the ideas of the fish of Jonah being a submarine. Good Lord. That's one of the most far out ideas I've ever heard. Or the Mount, of Mount Sinai. The mount was the name for a spaceship? That's out there too. Maybe Sinai was just Sinai and Mount was the spaceship at Mount Sinai. Who knows? We do know that we found Mount Sinai, just where it says in the Bible. It mentions once, I think in the book of Galatians, in the Arabia. It's not in the Sinai Peninsula. You wouldn't think that, would you? It's pretty much across the border, just barely into Saudi Arabia. They don't want us going there, so they have it fenced off. They don't want us going there at all. And the Saudis are not a bunch of Muslims like you think. They're a bunch of Jewish people as well. And in case you're wondering, I do believe that the Israelites possessed all of Saudi Arabia, the entire peninsula. Why? Because the footprint symbol shows up everywhere. Everywhere across that peninsula, there's a pair of sandals chiseled in stone. Somebody saw fit to mark the territory. And we know that the borders of Israel are fully described in the Bible, and we know that Israel never made it. Never got all that land that was marked off for them to have. It's kind of interesting. And we also know that those aren't Israelites occupying that land right now. So how is all this stuff going to happen? Well, there's going to be a big die-off, a big kill-off, because there's not going to be many of us left if we're all going to go marching back to the Promised Land together. And it does say, members of the house of Israel, my people, our people probably, if you're listening to this, and members of the house of Judah are going to walk back to the Promised Land arm in arm. It does say that there's going to be a lot more Israelites than those from Judah, and that we're going to be having a hard time finding people from the south to go back there with, and we're going to go back together. I look at it and I think of it as literal. Now, I have no idea the circumstances it's going to take to make that happen, but who knows? You know, maybe the Sahara is going to bloom green again. It was green a while back, not that long ago. Maybe the forest of Lebanon will grow again with their giant cedars. Big trees, big logs out of that forest. Maybe the whole land will become lush and green again. Maybe it will stop being a desert. We just don't know. I did have a vision once, and I will share that with you now. It seems appropriate. And it was a strange kind of a vision. And I don't really hold to this very much, because there's some indicators that all three men were hung from one pole with maybe 3 different crossbeams on the one. But yet in this, there was just one on the cross, and being propped up on a high cross at that. It wasn't on the low cross as described. They didn't have to get a guy that far off the ground to crucify him. It just had to be a couple feet off your feet. It had to be off your feet. That was about it. So they could have been just a little bit above you. So you could have been talking to him almost face to face. But in this, the fellow was higher up by himself, and you had 2 Romans in full garb, dressed military uniforms, perhaps even for their time period. And they both put their shoulders to this cross, and they lifted it up, and they slid it into a hole in the rock, like a lock going into a keyhole. And when that wood locked in there, they stood back. And they both got on a knee each, because the earth began to rotate. From what I could tell, it was rotating north at a slow pace, but a steady pace, a constant pace. All the mass of the earth was taking Golgotha, the place where they crucified, executed people, was rotating all the way up to the position of the North Pole. I know. I'm supposed to be able to tell you what that means. I'm just telling you what I saw. Do I trust it? I don't know what to make of it. It shows me that the top of the world, the symbol, the rule of the world, it shows me the power. It's going to shift. The whole planet is going to shift. Okay, folks, that's enough for today. I've gone a little over. This is longer than the first video this morning. I did not answer the question adequately, who wrote the Bible. I'm not a Bible scholar. I'm not qualified to tease that out. I can appreciate anyone who does work on the Bible and analysis of it. However, I'm a little worried about those people who make claims about being the supermen, the supreme beings, the chosen ones. I just don't trust that. Why? It talks about such a being in the Bible wanting to rise above God, Yahweh, Creator, Father. We should be questioning things. We should be wary. We should stay alert and stay as flexible as we can. We are entering into a difficult period, and it is going to accelerate from here. The people that would be our masters can't hold on to the reins anymore. And the problem is they don't know what to do. I can tell you right now that we in America need to restore our original republic, and all we need to do that is roll back to the original 13th Amendment and make all subsequent amendments null and void. That does several things, but that's really for the other channel, giving psychology away. May Yahweh bless. May Yahweh restore the republic. May Yahweh make America good again.